I'll call the meeting to order. This is the Board of Directors Executive Committee meeting of the East Bay Regional Park District on Friday, October 28, 2022. And we're beginning the meeting at 12:32 p.m. I would ask our recording secretary, Monique, to take the roll call.
Okay, President Coffey.
Present.
Director Wasfi.
Here.
Director Rosario.
Here.
Thank you.
And we should note that Director Rosario is sitting in as the alternate for the committee instead of Director Lane. And Park District staff participating in the meeting?
Yes, we have Deputy General Manager Dr. Ana Alvarez, General Counsel Lynn Borgout, Acting AGM of Operations Steve Castile, AGM Susan Shu, AGM Allison Cook, Chief of Government Affairs Eric Fuller, Claire Griffing, and Acting AGM Lisa Gorgon.
Thank you, and thank you all for attending and looking forward to your presentations. Monique, could you please describe the Brown Act issues with this meeting?
Yes. Today's meeting is held pursuant to the Brown Act as amended by AB 361. Board members and staff may participate via phone, video conferencing, and/or through a hybrid of in-person and remote attendance. We are providing live audio and video streaming. Members of the public wishing to make a public comment can do so 1, live via Zoom, 2, by submitting an email, or 3, leaving a voicemail. This information is noted on the agenda. If there are no questions about the meeting procedures, we will begin.
Thank you. So the first item on the agenda is 30 by 30 Conservation Movement. Dr. Alvarez, an information item.
Thank you so much, Director Coffey. I am getting the PowerPoint presentation ready, so if you can bear with me.
Take your time.
Good afternoon. The item before you is an update on the 30 by 30 movement, in particularly the work that has been done in the last two years by the Park District staff in terms of accelerating the pace and scale of the work that we currently do here at the core of the mission of the East Bay Regional Park District. Director Coffey and Director Waspi and Director Rosario, today I'm being joined by several representatives from the Park District across divisions who have been assigned by General Manager Landreth to serve in a leadership capacity as part of the Park District's 30 by 30 Leadership Working Group. And they're here with me today. Those are the folks that you see here in the audience, as well as on the screen. And so we're very excited about having a very collaborative approach as we approach this body of work. And I'll be calling on them, and they're available to have it if you have any questions or comments or concerns. So with that, let's start by understanding what 30 by 30 is. Secretary Wade Crowfoot makes a point to really go deep in understanding that this is more than a conservation initiative. This is more than a policy. This really is about redefining conservation and being able to meet a moment in time where we're seeing a steep decline in our biodiversity, a steep decline in our natural spaces. And in essence, a recognition that the natural lands, the open space, and the natural world actually plays a very critical role to be able to offset and mitigate for the adverse impacts that we're seeing with the changing climate. So the 30 by 30 goal is to preserve 30% of the Earth's lands and waters by 2030. And it is indeed a global movement with 72 countries already committing to this conservation movement that's also looking at, again, putting at the forefront, at the front lines, the natural spaces and those ecological systems that truly serve as life-supporting systems. And when I say life-supporting systems, we're speaking of very basic concepts such as clean water and clean air, amongst other types of benefits. This is nothing new to us. This is something that we know at the core of who we are in our mission, at the core of our values, and it speaks to all of the values of all of the people that serve at the Park District. But what's different here is that it's a recognition for the first time of the critical role that this open space and the natural world plays in being able to fight climate change and be able to mitigate and adapt to those adverse impacts that we're seeing from climate change. Equally as important is the recognition that there's an environmental ethos here in understanding for the purposes of survival for the humankind to understand that we have a very short window of time because the science continues to point in the projections that we have less than 10 years if we're really going to make a difference and have the greatest amount of impact, and we're going to address some of these adverse impacts that we're seeing. So there's an urgency, if nothing else, to keep up with what we're seeing today and what we're going to be and how we're going to strategically place the lands and the ecological systems correctly. I often say that nature will continue to survive. It will be us, and the quality of life will be completely impacted by what we're seeing today. When I began my my work in this area, 15, 16 years ago, when climate science was emerging, the projections that we were seeing and the numbers that we were discussing, it was a very far away future. It was in the 2100. Those were the numbers. The types of changes that we were speaking about in science is what we're currently seeing today in 2022. We're living in the future, in that futuristic scenario that was very scary and can be very apocalyptic. But it's a moment of hope, and it's a moment of time when we can rise to that challenge by leaning on nature and protecting nature. Let's see. So under the President Biden's administration, he passed recognizing this body of work and recognizing how to quickly correct from the previous administration. Legislation was passed through an executive order that deals with the commitment and addresses, again, the need to combat climate change at home and also broadly. And he speaks of climate change and the impacts that we're seeing as a threat to national security, as you can see of what's happening on the East Coast and the West Coast, and just the billions of dollars in terms of damage. In his legislation, he also passed America the Beautiful report, and he streamlined existing resources into new programs and activities to prioritize this type of work and within a framework of principles. And this framework of principles that you see on the screen, I would like to note that these principles are also embodied in the board's policy of climate change policy framework in protecting park resources in a changing climate that the board of directors passed in 2018. It's here. So that just speaks again to the fact that the Park District has been dealing and advancing legislation, policy, and a huge body of work to quickly be able to correctly create that resiliency that we need to protect the natural world in Alameda and Contra Costa County. In fact, Vice President Harris was here a few weeks ago, and she had one speaking engagement in San Francisco, and she made it a point that she wanted to invite and showcase exclusively the body of work that's being done through the California Natural Resources Agency, through the 30 by 30 movement, and also and other type of work that California has done in terms of addressing climate change over the years. And in her presentation, and her main point was to acknowledge the fact not only to reinforce the principles in the executive order from the Biden administration, but also most importantly to say that the urgency in how to accelerate this body of work. And in fact, that California has been doing this work, and California is leading the nation. And when you speak of California, it's actually the Bay Area. So that was such an amazing moment. And it also such an incredible responsibility, because as I share with the colleagues, the Bay Area, who lives here in the Bay Area, is the East Bay Regional Park District when it comes to conservation and protection of open land. So kudos to all of you and your predecessors and all of the folks in the 86 years of the legacy of the Park District, because there was a national recognition that in fact, all the land that was acquired was first and foremost one of the primary tools in being able to protect the natural world. And now we need to go back and we need to open the land and we need to restore those ecological systems so that they can enhance the life supporting work that they do in cleaning the air and cleaning the water. So we were very privileged to represent the East Bay Regional Park District at this event. And I also would like to share a moment in her presentation. It felt like a pep rally for Cal and the Cal students, because the main piece was that the future of the planet Earth really resides with policymakers like yourselves today, practitioners like the folks that are here in this room, but also on the youth, because it's really an intergenerational challenge. And she says, coming back home is amazing. And I would like to share with you that one of the things that she has enjoyed the most as in her role as a vice president is that she has the privilege to be able to speak to astronauts in real time while they're in space. And she's asking them to turn around and to take a look at the Earth and to share how they feel when they look at planet Earth. And the most profound common theme that runs across those experiences is how fragile planet Earth is. Equally as important, how interconnected humanity is. So the natural world really depends on our everyday decisions of an individual, of organizations, as well as policymakers. And she, in her statements, she recognized the fact that California is leading the nation, because it was actually a year before the Biden executive order. It was actually Governor Gavin Newsom who passed an executive order to place nature-based solutions as the elevating nature-based solutions to fight climate change. And so we know that California stewards 1 out of the 36 bioregions in the world. So can you imagine thinking about planet Earth? There's only 36 places on Earth where we have the highest number of animal species and plant material or plant species. So we're 1 out of 36, and we're the 5th largest economy in the world. So it was actually the Newsom administration who also committed at the international level and is leading the United States in regards to our commitment to preserve 30% of the land and 30% of the waters by 2030. And that number, I always question the number, because there's also an international movement to preserve 50% of the earth for the natural world called Half Earth. And I said, why, how do we end up with 30%? And it basically comes down to rooting to the science. We have by 2030, which is 10 years from 2020, that's the window of time that we have to make the greatest amount of difference. So since then, since the executive order came about to place at the forefront those natural systems or nature-based solutions, the Park District has been front and center with our state partners in developing how are we going to accomplish all of this. So there was quickly, we were invited, the Park District was invited to participate, to consult, to have conversations on how are we going to approach this body of work, given the executive orders from the governor, and what does it mean? And so we were called upon to serve on the California Biodiversity Network, which was one of the first structural pieces that came together that brought together the scientists, the academia, as well as land practitioners from across the entire state. And we serve on the steering committee of the California Biodiversity Network, and we focus specifically on key areas to advance the science and to accelerate this body of work. We looked at the systematic conservation through the roundtables. We had a natural resource roundtable or stewardship roundtable, as well as the Climate Biodiversity Sentinel Site roundtable, and the Biodiversity Informatics and Community Science Roundtable. Those are roundtables of academia, scientists, researchers, practitioners, anyone and everyone who has been contributing to natural resource management and management of public lands, with equity center at the core of this work. In bringing together all these resources and being able to participate at a very robust stakeholder process that the California Natural Resources Agency did, with over 5,000 people to California participating in public meetings and specific workshops to start defining the pathway on how we're going to accomplish 30 by 30. The Park District, through the California Biodiversity Network, was called upon to publish and contribute to identify what are the research gaps, to look at the science and what we need. And a lot of things came together. And one of the things that I want to give a huge shout out to my colleagues, these are people from Berkeley Rosser College of Natural Resources. Dean David Arkley leads the steering committee, along with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. But we also have the Nature Conservancy, we have California Academy of Sciences, and a long list of over 60 agencies, nonprofits, land trusts, that came together to say, where is the science in all of this, and how are we going to root this piece? And one of their biggest contributions is consolidating all of the data, creating, how do we bring the museums, how do we bring the researchers, how do we bring the universities, and bring all these data together, and to think about that we're not only monitoring and tracking, but what are the key interventions that we need to do to stop the immediate decline of the wildlife. And that's a very audacious thing to do, because now we're questioning and we're saying, is it time to pivot? Is it time to do something different? Or are we going to continue doing the same and expect a different outcome? We also had, so in putting all those things together, we were able to publish Appendix D of California Pathways 30 by 30, which is a huge accomplishment. We also participated in our regional level of coordination by being a member of the working group for 30 by 30 with Together Bay Area. And our former AGM of ASD, Christina Kelchner, represented the Park District in those discussions. And Together Bay Area was able to identify and provide to the California Natural Resources Agency and the state what are the key projects here in the East Bay or in the Bay Area that would contribute to, that need to be put into practice, implementation to advance 30 by 30. In our work with the California Biodiversity Network, and between the time that the executive order came out from the governor's office and just before we, in trying to publish Appendix D, in my role as as a steering committee member of the California Biodiversity Network, I partner with our current president of UC Berkeley's Institute of Biodiversity, People and Parks, our former director of the National Park Services, John Jarvis. So John Jarvis and I partner to discuss what is really equity when you think about how to accelerate the pace and scale of protecting the natural world. And it speaks again to a different model of conservation. We're no longer doing a conservation model that's binary, where we say, is it protected or is it developed? That's no longer a viable model if we are to really avert what's happening here. The new model of conservation brings into practice, in the centers, people, equity. And so I was asked to serve and start working towards understanding the equity piece statewide, simply because of the fact, not because it's me, but simply because of the fact that the East Bay Regional Park District serves, or its boundaries is in California, and in the most diverse state in the nation, and in the most diverse county in California. And so this picture is one I'm sharing with you, one of my most favorite pictures that was taken, I think, in 2017. And when I speak of equity and issues of environmental justice, this is what I'm speaking to, the next generation, because we are living today we're living the children's past. And this is the youth, and these are the future stewards, and thinking about protecting the natural world, not just only today, but 50 years from today, 100 years from today, you have to focus on the youth. And this is the youth of communities that live next to Coyote Hills Regional Park. And when I asked them, and you see Ann Castlebaum and Director Lane on the background, when I asked them how many languages were spoken in that group of about 30 students, there were 7 languages spoken there. They were trilingual, bilingual and trilingual. None of them was Spanish, except for me. And the main language that was spoken was Arabic. And there was Farsi, and there was Moroccan, and there was German, all types of languages. And I asked, and I have asked staff, why can't we have a welcome sign in Coyote Hills in Arabic that says welcome? And me saying that is far more than just the checking the box that to say, oh, yes, we're translating our materials. That's not what I mean. It's creating a sense of belonging. And the answer is, well, the children that go there are not the children that you saw. These are children from parents that work in the silicon industry. They speak English. Of course they do. Not only do they speak English, they speak 3 or 4 languages. That's not the point. The point is that we want to have a cultural connection so that their grandparents and their parents, and that they can see that we're acknowledging their presence, that this place belongs to them because it's our public lands. And so we convened, with that sentiment, we convened a statewide equity forum. And I was very privileged to work with John Jarvis, representing the Institute for Parks, People, and Biodiversity, and Ify Tumber-Sander with the USC Civic Engagement. And we had very, very sincere, candid conversations with over 50 representatives that included scientists, academians, land practitioners, outdoor recreation professionals, as well as representatives from the state agencies. And we were able to identify 10 key areas or 4 thematic pieces to understand the science and where the research gaps to inform the strategies that were to be published as part of California's Pathway 30 by 30. My participation signals to you and signals to the world as the East Bay Regional Park District being front and center at the table and contributing more than just in our boundaries. So let's talk about the conservation framework. On Earth Day of 2022 of this year, the state of California, we were able to meet that goal to publish the Pathways 30 by 30. And the framework provides not only the principles and the goals, but also how we approach the work. And again, it's the new conservation model that we're pivoting for the binary protected and developed lands. But we're speaking also what is now a term that's being coined, intersectional environmentalism, guided by the science and traditional knowledge and input for indigenous communities and communities of color to create resiliency from a changing climate through nature's ecological process, or what we call nature-based solutions, such as the wetland restoration. And the East Bay Regional Park District has done tremendous work in restoring our wetlands. Under the clock that we keep saying, those horizontal levees, if we're really going to minimize the flooding and the king tides or be able to protect the shoreline, it needs to be through a natural solution, through ecological restoration of the wetlands. But after 2030, it will be a very different solution. So climate change is something that we need to continue to adapt and change based on the pace and scale of what we're seeing. So we're constantly adapting. Here's the 3 main principles. And so the governor says, as we advance the protection of biodiversity, you must do it by including having equitable access to nature for all and reflect the needs and interests of local communities through meaningful community engagement, not outreach, but meaningful community engagement, and mitigate and build resiliency to climate change through climate smart land management. Climate smart land management is another term to say that we're going to leverage multiple benefits as we do this work, and we're going to do our best not to create unintended secondary consequences, such as green gentrification. As we restore those beautiful spaces, the developers will come in and displace the communities that have been living, for instance, in the shorelines, what were before industrial shorelines. And now they become gorgeous open spaces with majestic views of the bay. So it may feel overwhelming, but the more I dive into this work and the more the Park District gets into the details, the more exciting it is. Because again, as California Natural Resources Secretary Wade Crowfoot says, the audacious is not only possible, but is absolutely necessary so that we can rise to this moment in time. And the loss of nature means many things, but most importantly is the fewer places to act as refuge for wildlife struggling to adapt to the changing climate. So we have to have big, bold actions to keep pace with climate change. And so what does that do to the work that we've been doing here at the East Bay Regional Park District? Again, do we continue doing the same? Do we reimagine our work? Do we start reprioritizing? Do we start giving people the opportunity to start doing cross-generational or cross-divisional synergetic thinking around the work that we currently do? And so the Pathways document speaks just to that. And I want to for you to see the image on the right, because as we approach this work and given the framework in leveraging multiple benefits, climate resiliency, protecting biodiversity, and addressing issues of equity and centering people into this model of conservation, how can they do that? And so there's a structure here, a framework, and it's called the Partnership Coordinating Committee. So Secretary Crowfoot rightfully says, California is so diverse in its microclimates. It's so diverse in its topography. It's so diverse on how humankind has developed these lands. And the impacts of climate change differ from Central California to what we're seeing on the coastlines to what we may be seeing further south versus up north. So he's leaning into regional government. And he's saying, we're not giving a prescribed approach because that will signal failure. Instead, we're leaning to regional governance to understand what needs to be done, place-based solutions. And we're going to learn how those place-based solutions through the Biodiversity Network that I just spoke to you about, where we participate, the Biodiversity Council, which is comprised of head decision makers from department state agencies. So the head of the Department of Conservation, the head of the California Fish and Wildlife, the State Parks Director, all those 26 to 28 agencies come together and have discussions on this Biodiversity Council. We are also looking at our tribal partners. It's so exciting that in a few weeks ago, the state parks signed an MOU with a tribe for the first state parks to be operated by the indigenous people that dwell on that land and bringing in the traditional ecological knowledge. There's the Ocean Protection Council that also academia, scientists, the marine industry, all working together to save the coastal waters and the pristine life that resides. And then there's the regional work groups and coalitions. And that's where the Together Bay Area is. And we have a very important role in Together Bay Area through the participation of Lisa Bollinger at the board of directors, and also through staff's participation. Actually, the East Bay Regional Park District, as I understand, was a founding member of Together Bay Area. And all these networks and all these different entities fit into the Partnership Coordinating Committee, which I serve representing all of you. And so we continue to be front and center on how we're not only going to resolve for the East Bay lands, but also how we can be a true meaningful partner statewide. The 10 pathways that you see here, I will have to also make a note that we're currently doing all, if not most, if not all of these pieces throughout the work I can attest in 2016 that we have been focusing on how to manage for all these pieces. And now with California Pathways 30 by 30, now we have the framework to bring all those pieces that we have been working for in the last couple of years, and even more so now under our new administration with Sabrina Landreth, to really rethink and approach our regional partnerships differently so that we can in fact be more impactful and effective in addressing these regional issues. So the question is, what are we conserving? What counts and doesn't count? You can just imagine being in a room or multiple rooms, virtual and in person, to come to a collective consensus on the definition of what needs to be protected. So we arrived and we felt that the land and coastal water areas that are durably protected and managed to sustain functional ecosystems, both intact and restored, and the diversity of life that they support. So again, it speaks to all of the bank that is land at the East Bay Regional Park District. Now, what remains is how can we accelerate opening that land and continue restoring it? It comes one and two, hand in hand. So with that definition, we looked at all of the public lands, all of the open space in California, and it was determined through a series of algorithms and criteria that 24% of California land is already conserved and meets that definition, and 16% of our coastal waters. So really what we have to do, the body of work, what we need to focus is the next 6% by 2030, and the remaining to get to 30% of the coastal waters. So where we are at the East Bay Regional Park District and our district lands is that we see that 42% of our lands meet this definition. And we are currently working with our planning department to be able to continue reviewing the conservation, how we meet the conservation criteria for the remaining of the lands and what needs to be done to be able to understand the state of the remaining lands in the East Bay Regional Park District through this lens. I also wanted to share with you that since the publishing of the Pathways 30 by 30 document, which is the pathway with over 75 strategies and intentionality and priorities for the entire state of California, we have continued to do the work to advocate and create community in this momentum. We had the opportunity to host Secretary Wade Crowfoot's Northern California regional convening of the conservation leaders that contributed to the development of the California Pathways 30 by 30. And so here we have state agency representatives, as well as coalition representatives, as well as the president of California's Land Trust Association. And the one thing that I want to, the main point that I want to leave with you and our staff and our audience is that the reason why the East Bay Regional District was selected or picked as the site to host this specific convening of people to celebrate the publishing of 30 by 30 pathways was precisely because of the history of the East Bay Regional Park District, one, and two, because of the contributions and the role that we played front and center in developing the framework. And Roberts Regional Park was selected, or the Oakland Hills, Berkeley Hills was selected as the site, referencing the leadership on saving those hills as part of the history piece of the park district. Since the publication of Pathways 30 by 30, we have also been asked to contribute and participate in support of California international conversations, because again, California is leading. And so here's an event that took place virtually, internationally, and in person in San Francisco with the consulate of the French consulate, with the French consulate understanding what France is doing and what the work that they've done and some of the barriers and some of the opportunities and what we're doing here in California. You will see that it was facilitated by John Jarvis to speak of the national peace. And you see Deputy Secretary of Biodiversity, Jennifer Norris, sitting with representatives from France and UC Berkeley College of Natural Resources. On September 28th, we had the first kickoff statewide. And this event was coordinated through the Partnership Planning Committee in which we serve. And we wanted to get the word out and do the kickoff officially of the Pathways 30 by 30 that was published in April. There was a convening of over 500 people in attendance at the building in Sacramento with the California Natural Resources Agency. Governor Newsom joined virtually, as well as other elected officials. And we had a delegation of Park District representatives. All the people that you see here in this room were part of this movement. Where it's the first time that we, after doing all the work to create the definitions, the databases, understand the measurements, the metrics, the documents, the strategies, this was the very first event to say we're off. We're going to start implementing and we need to get through to our goals. And in doing so, the state also revealed huge strides that have already been made towards implementation, such as the work that has been done with tribal communities, and also some of the work that has been done in expediting the principles of equity in this body of work. I also would like to acknowledge that Senator Nancy Skinner joined remotely, along with Assembly Member Ash Cartla, who was there in person, and they both of them shared some of their amazing work and the work through their colleagues in the legislation that they've been doing to advance 30 by 30 and emphasize the need for all of us to work together to be able to succeed. A huge note of appreciation to Senator Nancy Skinner, who served on the East Bay Regional Park District Board of Directors. In her comments to over 500 people statewide at this event, she made a very specific reference as why it can be done by sharing the history of the East Bay Regional Park District and saying that it was the East Bay local leaders back in the Great Depression that created the park district to preserve as much land as possible. And now we're the largest park district in the country with over 125 acres of public lands within our boundaries and a key partnership with state parks. It was an amazing moment, to say the least. I think my colleagues will feel the same way, because again, the East Bay Regional Park District was pointed out as the demonstration that it can happen if we think about coalition building, regionality, and through deep partnerships as we pivot in the conservation movement and in the conservation industry. At this partnership event, and I always say, and I think my colleagues in Sacramento got tired of me saying these are beautiful concepts. We align in the values. We have dedicated our lives to protect the natural world. No money, no funding, there's not much we can do. Through the state budget allocation process in 2021 and 22, $54 billion have been allocated to combat climate change under the Newsom administration. Some of it is one-time money and some of it is programmatic. But most specifically, when it comes to meeting the goals and implementing 30 by 30, $1.6 billion have been identified for implementation in 2020, late 22, early 2023, and 2024. Here's a quick view of where the money is, where the pockets of public funds have been allocated. And you will see that the share lion is coming in through the State Coastal Conservancy with $700 million, specifically for habitat restoration and protection, acquisition of open space, nature-based solutions for coastal resiliency, and wildfire resilience. Again, the East Bay Regional Park District has a long and a beautiful partnership journey with the Coastal Conservancy through the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. So we hope that we can continue partnering with them as we implement projects on the ground. Then you will see that there's $245 million with Wildlife Conservation Board, again for forest conservation, oak woodlands conservation, as well as climate adaptation and resiliency. And then there's also funding allocated in different areas within the Department of Fish and Wildlife for wetland restoration, natural community conservation planning and acquisition, as well as regional conservation investment strategies. One of the things that we keep seeing, and one of the challenges for everyone, is how is all this money going to come into play and be implemented and be on the ground? So we're already contributing to those discussions on how we can get this as quickly as we can onto the ground and onto the people to do the projects that the work that needs to be done. And that's a big challenge because the state, regional agencies, governmental agencies, community-based organizations, we're all having the same ailment of lacking capacity. So that's what we've been focusing since then. I also would like to take a moment to share with the Board Executive Committee that as we try to create community in this movement across the state and within the Bay Area, we also would like to create a meaningful pathway to create community within all the professionals, all of the people behind the mission of the East Bay Regional Park District. And that's at the request of our new general manager to simply say, can we ask people, what are they thinking? How do they approach this work? Have we ever asked the park ranger what are the most audacious thing that the park ranger needs to be able to protect that land or to be able to address what he's seeing at the front lines of climate change? So we called for a cross organizational opportunity for anybody who wants to come and understand what 30 by 30 is and how they can be meaningfully engaged in this body of work. So we had a great turnout. We had over 85 park district staffs just yesterday or the day before, 2 days ago. My week is coming, 2 days ago. And people were really excited. And you can just imagine they were moved by the fact that they were included and that their voice really matters and that they will have a role and that the decisions are not going to be done behind some door or behind by a few people, but in fact, we're tapping into everybody's creativity and we're tapping into everybody's thinking, and every voice and every idea has the same weight and it matters the same way. What an interesting concept, but that's what's needed to be able to rise to the moment. What we have heard since then, since the event, is just a tons of positive feedback. And here you have board members that volunteered to come, and they were there with the staff, including Director Rosario, who did the land acknowledgement, and Director Corbett, who joined the discussion of the focus group discussion on equity. And what we've heard, and I would like to share, and I don't want to embarrass people, but I have been approached with emails and on the sidelines to say, thank you for allowing me an opportunity to participate and for me to be able to speak up. And I see that there's a place for me in which I can make a difference. Because if we're going to meet this challenge, and it may seem overwhelming at times, it takes everyone and everything, individual actions, as Director Waspi knows so well. The choices that we make as an individual really make a difference. We will reduce our use of plastics. We will do the most sustainable pieces that we can that are feasibly possible. And so I have a staff member that I don't want to embarrass, but he wrote the most amazing email that if I have his permission, I can share with you, that says, Ana, I oftentimes speak to my children about legacy. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to build the legacy that I can speak to my children at the Park District. That's how important this is, because they understand that we need to approach the work a little bit differently. We need to push forward what we're doing really well, and we need to accelerate it. And we need to be able to tell our story correctly, because this is the core and the mission of the East Bay Regional Park District. And this is our time. Thank you so much. That concludes my presentation. Oh, no. So what's next? So what's next? We've done a lot of work, and we'll continue to do the work, and we will tell our story. We will focus on that. And we are opening the climate mini grant applications that are open to all of the Park District staff on January the 9th, so that they can bring forward those things that they really would like to see that matter to them mostly. And we are enhancing capacity to our teams to tap into the state and federal funding opportunities. We're doing that, or we are diligently working on that, and you will see more of that as the budget presentations for 2023. We already have an amazing team, and we're going to continue to expand on that amazing team. that's being led through government affairs and finance through the general manager's leadership. And we will continue to expand our regional and state partnerships. And now my presentation is concluded. I'm open for any questions. And I would like to see if I won't even pretend to answer everything. I would like my colleagues to join in the conversation.
You were right. This is overwhelming. The extent to which this park district is at the intersection of all these facets of what state and federal government are doing to enhance conservation of land and habitat. It is overwhelming. There's just so many facets of this major new public policy at the state and federal level that intersect with what we do at every level: conservation of land, of habitat, of creating access for people to enjoy for recreational purposes, to enhance equity for communities that historically haven't had such access. We're doing this work all the time. It's expensive, and both the state and federal government have put in lots of money, as you just state alone, almost $1.5 billion you had up on that slide.
Yes.
And we're doing it, and we've been doing it, and have all sorts of projects available. It has overwhelmed me from just listening to all the facets of the involvement you are involved in and the district is involved in, from senior management levels like yourself down to the staff meetings you've held. This is huge, a huge moment in time for this park district. And it's both exciting and overwhelming. And as the GM knows, I've been bothering she and government affairs for the last year about, do we have enough people to be and resources and advocates to be going after this funding for all this stuff we're doing that advances this cause of 30 by 30. I want to turn it over to my colleagues on the committee, but I do have one question. I wonder if it would be difficult to go back to your slides and that the 30 by 30 pathways, where you showed various circles of advancement and the organization of those pathways.
This one? Oops. Yeah, I need to share.
The pathways.
Yeah. This one.
There you go. So I want to embarrass you, Anna, and ask you where within those circles your involvement from your appointment has evolved.
Sure. I started my with the space and opportunity given to me by Sabrina Landreth. I was able to dedicate a great portion of my time working at the steering committee of the Biodiversity Network here. And because of the work that I did here with many other colleagues, I was appointed to the Partnership Coordinating Committee.
Ah, okay.
For these two.
Wonderful. I just wanted to understand that.
Mhm.
And we are fortunate to have your participation in this effort, again, because it just exemplifies and supports this concept that we are at the center of all of this in terms of at least local agencies,
Yes.
apart from the state and federal government. So thank you for that participation. And congratulations on your appointment, and it's your involvement is much appreciated.
Thank
On a very practical level, this is all kind of heady stuff. We're doing the right thing, and as you referenced, we all feel like this is a legacy
Mhm.
that we can claim. But on the less heady level and the practical level, there's lots of funding out there that we are eligible for, and your participation and the whole agency's participation enhances our ability to gather that funding to pursue all the budget needs we have to achieve the 30 by 30 goals. So with that, I'll turn it over first to my colleagues, Director Rosario and Director Waspy, for comments or questions.
Sure. Thank you.
Go ahead.
First, I wanted to say that the 3030 group presentation to the employees a couple of days ago was just, I think, very, very successful and very meaningful. And the fact that our employees had an opportunity to express what they thought their visions of were, and I think means a lot. It meant a lot to everyone that participated, and me too. And I think what this does is really accentuates this really is a global emergency. We have very little time, and I think the international panel on climate change stated, I think we need to drastically reduce emissions by 42% by 2030, or we will zoom past even 2%. And at 2%, those consequences are dire. And so I think it really puts the pressure on us, because we know we need people, as President Coffey has said, to accomplish these, and money appears to be available, but I think it really behooves us to really pay attention to, or put more pressure to get a ballot measure in 2024 to augment our staff and take care of our infrastructure and environmental projects. So this is a very welcoming. Congratulations on your leadership on the committee, on the 30 by 30 committee, and I really appreciate General Manager's direction and to be inclusive. And I think together we can certainly do our part. And but yeah, I think we have now a clear map of what we need to do. We know how to do it, and just having the wherewithal to carry through with the parcel tax, so that we can accomplish what we need to do. But thank you so much. Very much appreciated and very timely.
Thank you. Director Waspy.
Thank you, and congratulations, Anna, and all of the staff that's participating in this. I'm obviously love this. I agree with Director Rosario and everyone else. This is the quotes, a great challenge, global emergency, and we have very little time. I agree with all of that. I'm very happy with what we're doing. I think we're going to be the example. I think we talked about that before, that, it's great. The San Francisco Bay Area, the Regional Park District, the state of California, we're all on the leading edge. I worry very, very seriously about, we're not the big fish anymore. I mean, China and India, I hope they come along with us, but I don't, we can deal with all that. But I think by focusing on what we're doing, I'm very, very happy about that. Just a few questions. I mean, so is there any data on this? I mean, I know there's lots of extraneous stuff and we have a wheel with everybody meeting together, but I mean, isn't it, if 30 by 30, can somebody point out, what do we need to buy? What do we need to preserve? Is that data there? And is that what we're going to focus on as a park district? I also, flying around here, but I'm happy that that 42% of our land qualifies. Did East Bay Mud participate in this? Because they're probably the second largest landowner in Alameda County, and I'm wondering if they've participated and wonder what their level of, if we use the word qualify to be part of this, I wonder if they're participating, and I wonder how we look at the world when our next door neighbor, if we can't get them to participate. I'm not suggesting or not, but I'm just wondering about this. I also I think we should be the example. I'm glad we are the example. I'm proud we're the example. I think that whoever wrote the email, we do have a legacy. That's something to be incredibly proud of. I think there's lots and lots and lots of things we can do. And just to take a shot, I'm 1.6 billion from the state that is so totally into this. Wasn't there a $54 billion surplus last year? I think if we're really serious about this being the greatest challenge facing humanity or the existence of our Earth, I think 1.6 billion is a little short, but I hope we can take advantage of what there is there, and I hope we can work to affect this change. And I once again, as from my little perspective, because I've been this forever, I think we can be an example, but we got to get rid of plastic. And should I say this? I think we really need to be aware of our participation. We're not going to solve the world problem. We can do it here. And one of those great slides up at Redwood Park, I think Sam Hodder was in there. We're all sitting on big, fat, thick virgin redwood picnic tables, and I just don't get that. But anyway, I wish you the best. I hope I could participate. Oh, my other little shot, not a shot, but I wish I could have been there with Dee and Ellen, but I was crunching numbers in the finance committee meeting, which is fun, but not as fun as that would have been. And I wish I could have been there. So in the future, hopefully I can be. Thank you very much.
Certainly, Director Waspi, this is the beginning of a large body of work. We will certainly include you. I will have to get back to you on your question on East Bay Mud, unless planning has that answer, because we've been focusing. When you asked the question, I thought the world and I thought California. I haven't looked at our neighbor. We haven't been focusing on our neighbor, but certainly we'll get the information back to you.
Thank you.
Okay. I have a couple questions. Jumping off Director Waspi's question about the 42% of lands that we have that qualify. I'm trying to grasp what the 42% East Bay Regional Parks lands qualify for a definition. What is the definition? In other words, we have 125,000 acres of parkland. Why isn't that considered 100% of the conservation goals?
The definition speaks to the durability of the land in terms of sustaining the ecological systems and the specific species of plant material and species of wildlife. That also speak to the resiliency of those lands as the climate change. There's criteria that also speaks to the connectivity for that plant material and those species to migrate as they're looking for refuge from the adverse changes of climate. So there's and I'm just going by memory, but there's a great detail in criteria. And I know Brian is here. He can give you more information as he's leading the status review of our lands under that conservation lens.
Yeah, and I'd be interested in an example of land that does qualify and that land that we have that doesn't qualify in fulfilling these goals.
Yeah, good afternoon, Brian Holt, Chief of Planning, Trails and GIS. So a lot of it comes down to really kind of the basic crux of the Park District's dual mandate, right? We have a mandate to protect habitat and protect species. We also have a mandate to provide public access. And so there's so those of our lands that are That 42% also lines up pretty consistently with our lands that are currently in land bank status. And also those that are designated as regional preserves, which are largely for habitat protection. So you wanted an example of some lands that would qualify, like our lands in the East Contra Costa County Habitat Conservancy. Those are preserve lands. We bought them in partnership with the County Conservancy, primarily for the purposes for species protection. We're working on how we can plan for compatible recreation within those preserve lands. That's a challenge, but it's something that we're making good progress on, and you'll have the Roddy Ranch Golf Course public access and restoration plan coming before you, which is a really thoughtful plan that emphasizes habitat restoration, but also provides an opportunity for public access. So that's part of the balance that we have to do in these preserve lands. And then so some of our lands that currently do not qualify are those that would be more of the regional recreation areas. So we're going in and kind of taking a look at some of those sites that they may be designated as a regional recreation area, but they might provide really good habitat and really good climate benefits. And it may be something that we think should be included in there. So we're going in and taking a look at those things that we feel should be. Some of our properties just, may not qualify. If you look at Judge John Sutter Regional Shoreline, for example, but which is largely developed. But if we were to move forward with shoreline restoration and those types of things, those would be projects that I would think should be eligible for funding as for climate resilience as we work towards restoration. So that's kind of how it's broken down right now, is just sort of right now, it's been sort of a mapping and paperwork exercise of looking at, which areas have more intensive recreation and which areas that don't. And those areas that have more intensive recreation at this point are not necessarily be included in the 30 by 30 calculation.
So Oyster Bay would not be included because it was a landfill in the past, and now we're doing disc golf.
It's a good argument that, yeah, Oyster Bay was a landfill in the past. We are doing disc golf out there, but we're also doing a lot of tree planting, and we're doing some butterfly habitat restoration, and we're doing good projects that are good for the climate. And that's getting down to a granular level that may not be captured in the current, sort of 30 by 30. But again, the vast majority of the work that we do here at the Park District has a real climate benefit. And that's difficult to, I think, capture always in these types of things, but that's something that Dr. Alvarez, Eric, myself, and others are going to, continue to advocate for our projects to be included.
It's fascinating. It's like a new facet of planning that I hadn't really focused on in the past. As you personally know, I've been frustrated with some of the Habitat Conservancy restrictions on things like picnic tables, right? And shade and facets of park planning that would enhance the user experience, like picnic tables and such. And what this suggests is, if you include in your planning goals 30 by 30 compliance, for lack of a better term, it would enhance the need to be restrictive in some sense. That may have been frustrating for me. So it gives me a new kind of means of juggling these issues.
I think that's where we're at now. I think you're correct. I think what we're working towards is to be able to really make the argument to, it's easier to just say recreation over here, habitat protection over here. I think what we're really working towards in partnership with the Conservancy and others, that well-designed, well-planned, well-managed recreation can be entirely compatible with these climate solutions, and are actually going to be critical. Anna spoke about the intersectionality of this sort of discussion. And we're not going to be able to put everything into nice, neat little boxes. So, so I think, Roddy Ranch is a good example of, I've talked about the sort of proof of concept where we can show that we can enhance species habitat, provide for species protection that's required under the Conservancy, but still provide a good substantive outdoor recreation experience and serve our taxpayers that have invested in protection of these lands.
Okay, thank you. Anna, there were some references to organizations in your slides that I don't want to take up too much more time, but I made some notes. The you referenced the Berkeley Rouser College of Natural Resources. Is that UC Berkeley?
Yes, that's UC Berkeley.
So it's a department of the college.
The UC Berkeley has a College of Natural Resources, and within the College of Natural Resources, there's the Institute for Biodiversity, People and Parks,
Oh, and that's John.
and that's John
Jarvis's-
Jarvis.
Okay, so it's within that college at UC.
Yes. And I have, Eric wanted to make a couple of comments, if I may.
Eric Feeler, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs. And I just wanted to touch on what your question was, Chair Coffey, in terms of being qualified. The land qualifications is one thing, but there's the funding stream, that's another thing. And so for the funding side of things, it's moving through existing programs at the state level. And one of the key components or key criteria that they will be considering is equitable access. And so we will have opportunities to apply for funding, even if the land itself doesn't apply to the conservation goals, it may apply to the equitable access goals. So we look at a lot of our parks as having that aren't included in the 43% as having a real opportunity to secure additional funding through the equitable access lens.
Yeah, and that makes me think about Point Melati. It makes me think about Rodeo. So I appreciate that point. Okay, well, that,
Can I ask one more question?
yeah, I'm done.
Okay, I was just thinking, so Brian brought up an interesting point. So we have 42% of our lands that qualify, and I don't want to get too crazy here, but theoretically, if we open some of our lands to mountain biking, that seems like, I mean, is there a potential we could lose some of our qualifications by opening up some of our lands to mountain biking? And I know we could probably say we will never consider mountain biking in regional preserves, but Briones is, I mean, 42% must be more than just our regional preserves. I would bet, I don't know, if I'm correct in that assumption, but
That's a great
I'm
question.
wondering if, you know, we call parks regional preserves, we call them regional parks, regional recreation areas. If we really embrace 30 by 30, is there some, well, you couldn't call them 30 by 30 parks, but some way of incorporating that designation with all of its status, that's a bad word, but for that type of recognition that we could get our commitment, so to speak.
That's an excellent question, Director Waspi. A good expression is that we keep saying we're building the plane as we're flying it. We just had a meeting yesterday with the state representatives and the partnership planning committee. And a similar question was asked, and we don't have the answer to be determined. Right now, what Deputy Secretary Norris says, that might be a third or fourth phase to understand those pieces. Right now, we're literally trying to get our hands around what currently counts as the 24%, and what's the lowest hanging fruit that we can bring in quickly in terms of quick acquisition. And at the same time, Eric is absolutely right, getting the money that has been allocated and get it on the ground ASAP. So there's a lot of competing interests here, but competing priorities, I should say, all aligned towards the same goal, but it's quite a challenge, and we are to be determined. And yes, that's an interesting concept in redefining the definition of a park, because we have our own regional definitions, and then there's the industry standard, what qualifies, what the criteria that determines what's a preserve versus a recreational area. We can certainly do that body of work, and it's time to do that. So it could be in alignment with the new definition of conservation. And I appreciate that under the leadership of our general manager, Sabrina Landres, she's giving us ample space to reimagine our work and rethink how we are approaching the work. And we can certainly bring that forward to the 30 by 30 leadership group to have a conversation of what all that means and where the opportunities may lie and what the challenges may be. Because every potential implementation piece it's such a complex piece. It's not super clear that we leverage all the benefits that you want without giving something up. So it's very complicated, and we can certainly continue to have the conversations. We can do that. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from staff, general manager, or your team? All right, then I'll bring it to, were you going to say something?
No, I was just gonna say, just a truncated version of what I said at the kickoff event with our staff is really just, this is a reflection of not just, you know, a branding effort or, you know, that we need to change the way that we're doing, but it really is, again, as Anna mentioned, just a huge compliment to all the work that's being done here for decades and continues to be done. So it's really, for me, a big chunk of this is about telling our story. So we'll be working alongside our board on that as we launch into these efforts. And a huge thank you to Dr. Alvarez for serving and representing us at the state level.
Terrific. I notice we have Kelly asking for public comment. Monique, are there any other requests for public comment?
No, I have not received any requests at this time other than Kelly's.
Okay, then Kelly, why don't you go ahead? You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. First, I'd like to, this is probably the first time in 100 years anybody's asked for this, but I'd like to call for realistic time management, staying on schedule. Let's not have meetings drag on. Set a schedule that's completely unrealistic, and then make the public commentators be the only speakers who have to adhere to a strict time limit. This item was supposed to take 20 minutes, and it's already taken close to 70. Okay.
It's worth more, Kelly.
Yeah, well, then just change your schedule. Set a realistic schedule. If you want to take 6 hours, write it down, and then we can all, follow the schedule.
That's not how we conduct meetings.
Well, obviously it was worth more than 20 minutes, and you could have set
So
it for an hour
go ahead with your
again.
3.
Yeah, there's a 30 by 30 conservation agenda with 1 million acres of nature being lost to development in the US each year. In the last 40 years, the Sierra Club says wildlife population declined by 60% because of habitat loss and climate change. So I went looking at this and I said, 30 by 30, 125,000 acres. I went, did the math. And I said, if I give you full credit for every acre of the 125,000, how much is that in the larger scheme of these two counties? And I did the math, and I came up. I was shocked. 13% of the land area is already under the East Bay Regional Park District, which is already, by my count, I'm going to give you full credit, 45% of the 30% goal. So very impressive numbers. I was expecting to come up with paltry numbers, and I came up with very impressive, huge acreage counts that shocked me. Now going on now to the negative side, there's elaborate and intricate theories here on the ethereal plane of concepts, ideology, and philosophy. But the reality is sometimes is different from this theory as a bucket of cold ice water in the face. When we talk about land acquisitions, what we need to worry more about the Dublinization of Livermore, the Dublinization of Union City, Brentwood, and Mount Diablo. I'm not sure that's the right phrase, but that's the phrase they use over there in Livermore. When new land areas are being acquired, it's the Park District is effectively complicit as one of the main sponsors of suburban sprawl in the Tri-Valley. With developments being set up along the nice ridge lines or along wherever they think it's the good areas to develop, and then the Park District takes the leftover lands, but effectively they call that Dublinization. We need to be centering people in the parks, opening doors to parks, not posting signs that say no access and no entry, not building fences and barriers and gates. That's what needs to be happening out here. And a little bit more about land acquisition. Already have a lot of land out there. You don't have much to go to get up to 30%. Only another double the land.
Kelly, your 3 minutes are up.
Thank you. Let's move to the next agenda item, which is item 3, 2022 Climate Resiliency Mini Grant Program, Brushy P. Claire.
Hi, good afternoon. Let me grab my presentation. Having trouble with the screen freezing here. There we go. All right. I'm Claire Griffin, Management Analyst in the General Manager's Office, and I have the honor of sharing this exciting pilot project with you today. But it's important to acknowledge that our stewardship team, including Matt Grawl and Dina Robertson, have done excellent work to identify this pilot project and develop a relationship with our partner organization, Point Blue Conservation Science. So a little bit of background, in 2018, the Board of Directors adopted a board resolution establishing a policy framework for managing park resources in a changing climate. And to operationalize this policy, the Park District established an internal grant program as a way to provide funding to expand on the great work the Park District staff are doing to further climate protection. And over the last few years, climate resiliency mini grants have been awarded to innovative demonstration projects to reduce water, waste, energy, restore ecosystems, and mitigate climate hazards such as drought and wildfire. And this year, we're aligning our climate resiliency mini grant program with the goals of 30 by 30 and looking for projects that protect and restore biodiversity, improve equitable access to nature for all and reflect the needs and interests of local communities, and mitigate and build resilience to a changing climate through climate smart land management. So for the 2022 grant cycle, we've identified a single pilot project that aligns with these three goals. We're partnering with Point Blue Conservation Science, which is a nonprofit organization with the mission to advance ecosystem restoration and conservation and address the effects of climate change through science, partnerships, and outreach. And they have a program called Students and Teachers Restoring a Watershed Program, or STRAW, which is actually a 30-year-old program that collaborates and connects with schools, communities, landowners, and public agencies to restore local ecosystems. And to date, STRAW has worked with 45,000 students to restore over 35 miles of riparian habitat. STRAW provides full service restoration project management, including design, student training, implementation, maintenance, monitoring, and reporting. And Point Blue will also be partnering with the Alameda County Resource Conservation District to provide technical training, quality control, supervision, and all the necessary tools and safety equipment for the restoration project. The Park District's Wildland Vegetation Unit in the Stewardship Department is leading this partnership, and the goals of the pilot program are to restore native plant species cover, habitat function, and resilience to climate change throughout the project areas, while authentically engaging the local community by providing local students with place-based education. After exploring the Park District's lands, the Brushy Peak Regional Preserve has been identified as the best location for this restoration pilot because of its ecological need, proximity to schools, tribal community partnerships, and public accessibility. The restoration sites have been chosen. There's two restoration sites, one in the central and one in the southern portion of the park. One is a drainage site and the other is a wetland area near the staging area. And there's very little intact riparian habitat in and around Brushy Peak. So this is an important project to restore biodiversity and habitat function in the area. And it's important to note that the project is not going to impact some of the more culturally sensitive parts of Brushy Peak. The pilot project will take place over the course of 4 years. And during the first 2 years, Point Blue will work with local students and community volunteers through hands-on vegetation workdays or restoration workdays led by Brushy Peak's park supervisor, and provide science-based classroom lessons to complement those workdays. During the third and fourth years of the pilot, Point Blue will focus on plant establishment and sustainable maintenance practices and will conduct regular monitoring and reporting. In line with the 30 by 30 framework to incorporate equitable and authentic engagement in conservation work, this project will prioritize meaningful engagement and consultation with Indigenous tribal communities. And Point Blue is planning to develop a paid contract agreement with tribes culturally affiliated with the project area that describes their role in supporting the restoration project. The tribal support will be developed based on the goals and priorities of the tribe, but potential activities could include sharing knowledge and natural resources and the history and cultural significance of Brushy Peak with students either during the work days or during the classroom lessons, or potentially creating an apprenticeship for tribal youth to assist with implementation of the stewardship of the restoration. This is a pilot demonstration project that's just the beginning of the work that needs to be done to restore Brushy Peak. And we're hoping that this pilot partnership is successful so that it can be replicable throughout the park district in the future. The pilot program will be funded through the Park District's Climate Resiliency Mini Grant Program for funding for 2022 for the total amount of $220,000. And staff recommends that the Board Executive Committee consider recommending approval of the proposed restoration project to the Board of Directors. And I'm here along with the Chief of Stewardship, Matt Grawl, if you have any questions about the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Are there questions from the committee? Director Rosario.
Yes, thank you. This is sounds like a great endeavor here. Is Point Blue, do they do this elsewhere?
Yes. I don't have the details, but they've reached 45,000 students. You mean elsewhere outside of
Yes,
this project?
Mhm.
Yeah. So they have 30 years of experience with these types of partnerships. So that's why we thought that they were the right organization for this work.
Cool. Yeah, sounds great. And then so the constituent are there, it's just local schools in the Brushy Peak Livermore area?
That's my understanding.
Okay, great. Thank you. No, sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wasby.
Yeah, thanks. I think it sounds wonderful also. I think it's a great project and a great collaboration with these folks. But what does $220,000 look like as the total budget of the climate resiliency mini grant program? Will that clean it out for this year or?
Yes,
Okay.
that is the total budget for this year. We thought it was a good use of the funding this year to put toward this pilot project that's pretty comprehensive. The great news about this is the hope is every dollar we put in, we get $14 out because they're capitalizing on these partnerships and also volunteer work and student work. And so we see that it's a multi-benefit program. So we thought it was a good use of the funds.
I think it's a good use of the money also. And you mentioned the role of the Alameda County Resource Conservation District. Well, I guess I'm interested in what their role is, and I'm also wondering because they have funding. Are they going to have some skin in the game, or funding or sources?
I'm not sure about the details, but I know that they are providing quite a bit of support in terms of technical guidance and tools for the restoration. So there's definitely a partner at the table.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds like a great program and partnership. So I'm looking forward to how it works out. Matt, did you want to add?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Chief of Stewardship, Matt Grawl. We're really excited about this in stewardship. And I'm going to date myself a little bit, but I've been admiring the work of the STRAW program for about 20 years. And I'd known they've been doing this work for a number of years in Marin County on restoring streams for anadromous fish and working on reestablishing vegetation. And I visited a few project sites in the early 2000s, was just really inspired by their work. But I didn't know until very recently that they had programs in I think in the 9 Bay Area counties, and it touched so many students, and we're even a potential partner for us. So I really want to thank Dr. Alvarez for helping us make the connection with Point Blue and Straw and really start this program. This is just an exciting opportunity. And like I said, I've admired their work for many years and knew they were doing great restoration. So it's just great to have them coming on at this pilot project. We see a real potential to utilize this partnership and expand it. So this will be our first pilot, but we're hoping to do more with them. It just seems like a really great opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you. Then before asking for a motion to approve the staff recommendation, I'll look at Monique, any request for public comment?
Director Coffey, I have not received any public comments or requests to speak on this item.
All right, then I will ask if one of the directors would like to make the motion to approve the staff recommendation.
I'll move.
Second,
And Director Rosario seconds, Director Waspy made the motion. Would you please call the roll?
President Coffey,
Aye.
Director Rosario,
aye.
Director Waspy,
Aye.
so moved.
Thank you. Item 4, role of Park Advisory Committee. Eric, you've been working on this for quite a while.
Yeah. Can you help me with this? While we're starting, I will note that I have paper and pen, so I'm prepared to take feedback. Eric Feeler, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs. And this item is coming to you at the request of the Park Advisory Committee, but it really began its evolution. And Dee, I know you're on the Zoom in a conversation that Dee, as board president, had with our general manager and myself about and some of the PAC leadership about the role of the Park Advisory Committee. And this was probably October or so last year, probably about a year ago. And I really want to thank the board and Director Rosario for making the suggestion, and for General Manager Landreth and Deputy General Manager Alvarez to give us the space to try to reimagine the role of the PAC. I have been working with that entity, as Director Coffey well knows, since I started at the Park District. And it was always a bit of a, what is their role? And so that's what we're examining today, and really looking for a discussion and feedback, and hope that we have some, and that is what the PAC is seeking. They had a robust discussion at their September 19th meeting, and looked at 4 different possible definitions of the role, plus the existing board operating guidelines definition, and came back with 3 possible suggestions to share with you all. And we'd like to have some feedback on the 3 suggestions, maybe take them one at a time. But before we get to that, I do want to acknowledge and thank Flora Santos, who took over clerking the PAC shortly around the time that we started to have this conversation. So I'm glad Flora could join us today. We recently have transferred the clerking to Yuli Padmore as her interest in community work, I think will be a good fit. To move forward, the 5 items that we know the PAC is responsible for and needs to have provide recommendations to the board based on their charter or based on the board operating guidelines are the 5 items that are in front of you. And those really are the foundational part of their role. So I think we're hopefully all in agreement that those 5 pieces of foundational parts of their role should remain intact. And so at the September 19th meeting, the PAC was given 3 questions ahead of time to contemplate and provide feedback on. And the 3 questions were, what is the PAC's purpose? What is the PAC's mission? And what is the value add of the PAC to the Park District? And so you'll see common themes throughout. We'll address each one of these issues. This is the purpose responses. And you'll see the community feedback loop for challenging issues is really kind of the common theme in all of their answers. Again, when considering their mission, they did come back to the idea of being community-based input and really, embrace the notion of value-centered topics. And those are topics such as what Dr. Ana Alvarez was speaking to earlier today. Are we a leader in climate change? And I think based on the discussion we had earlier, yes. But there are other things that we can contemplate about our role in the community as an organization, and are we actually doing project delivery or programming delivery in those areas? So the value-centered topics were something that they were very much interested in providing input on. And then when considering the value add of the PAC, they very much felt like one of their roles was to provide feedback to staff ahead of time before the board had consideration of issues and projects. They view themselves as a bit of an external touchstone, ground truthing and basing in the community the work that we do and providing feedback. And as we all know, these are 21 individuals who are very well connected in their community, or they wouldn't be volunteering and being appointed to an entity like the Park Advisory Committee. They do have their own networks. And so making sure that we're hearing what they're hearing from their networks is really something of value to the Park District. In November 29, 2021, the full PAC had a discussion really about reimagining as we've talked about their role. And they came back with really wanting to know what the board's expectations were of them. And they also, I thought it was a very interesting comment about having staff articulate the most helpful input the PAC can provide before considering items. So thinking about putting in our staff reports, here is what we are seeking, or here are some elements of this project or this program that we really are looking for feedback on. I thought that was a very, very insightful way of looking at how they would be guided by staff in order to provide the most effective feedback. Last December, we conducted interviews with all 7 board members, and it was clear from those conversations that there's high value in the PAC, but the PAC are not policy advisors. They purely are advisor. I'm sorry, they don't make policy decisions. They are policy advisors, and that they really are a sounding board for challenging issues, and something that the board very much values as a voice in the community. And then the findings from our staff conversations last winter were viewing the PAC as an externally facing body and a bit of a research arm, not in the science way, but in examining what other agencies, what other like-minded agencies, sister agencies are doing and handling their challenges. So in fact, we brought in Santa Clara Valley Santa Clara Valley Open Space District and Mid-Peninsula Open Space District to have conversations with the PAC about how they activate their citizens and seeking advice. And it was very interesting in that Santa Clara Valley uses their advisory committee project by project. So they develop ad hoc advisory committees for basically big projects or big program areas. Mid-Pen, more similar to what the Park Advisory Committee, the role the Park Advisory Committee plays here in terms of providing guidance and feedback loop to the board. But I think the hearing the way other entities that are very similar are handling advice from the public was a very constructive exercise. So throughout these last series of slides, we wanted to do a word check and see what words came out and were most broadly used as we talked to all the various entities that have interest in the role of the PAC. And clearly, board, community, and PAC are all linked together. So they're very much seeing themselves as that bridge, community bridge between themselves and the board of directors. So here we have the existing board operating guidelines definition of the Park Advisory Committee, and they are to provide citizen input to policy matters. Would like to take a point of personal privilege to say we probably shouldn't use the word citizen because that's sort of self-selecting in terms of who can be on the PAC. But then they also see them as a channel of public communication and to study issues and advise on subjects and make recommendations and comments. So very not far off from where the discussions led, but there is room for enhancement and improvement. And so these are the three statements that they wanted to send back to the board for instructive and constructive feedback, and they will reconsider before making a recommendation in terms of an actual statement. And just to take a step back, the reason we're starting with the role statement is throughout the conversations that we've been having with the PAC, they do tend to, with 21 people in the room, they do tend to wander a bit, and we do kind of hit on the same themes. So we have to start somewhere. And so starting with their role is probably the most fundamental thing we could do. So that's why this is being brought to you today. And I would like to ask the recording secretary if Carlin Obringer, the chair of the PAC, was able to come back on. I know she was on, and she texted and said she had to do something. Okay, if she does come back on, please let us know, and she might want to say a few words. So with that, Chair Coffey, if you agree, would like to just read these one at a time, and then maybe each board member react to them and other staff react to them if the GM or DGM have input as well. So the current, as close to what is in the board operating guidelines as we could devise a role statement would be to provide community input into policy matters, community involvement, and a channel of public communication to the board to advise on subjects and make recommendations and comments. So interested in reactions to that potential role statement. And one thing that the PAC began to do toward the end of this conversation was starting to merge some of these together. So they're actually fairly close to each other, but would like to kind of come back with a finalized single version. So with that, I would be seeking input from the board of directors or staff on the first statement.
By that, you mean the status quo statement as opposed to the concise version, as opposed to the PAC member?
Yeah, well, I was hoping for feedback for the first one, and then we could do one at a time. But if you'd like,
Oh,
we
all right.
can do it the way you suggest. I'm open to either.
Okay. My reaction to all three is they're fine, and they do equate to what I've always, and I spent 13 years on the PAC, first appointed by Director Radke and later by the Contra Costa Board of Supervisors. So they're all consistent with my understanding of the role of the PAC. I'm wondering what comes to mind as I think back on it is, Eric, how do they get their issues? So when we talk about their role in providing input in the policy matters, community involvement, and channels of public communication to advise on subjects and make recommendations and comments. So I always felt that those subjects that came to the PAC were staff generated or board generated or generated on their own. And one of the things that I thought was a great facet of what they did is by the end of the year, the leadership of the PAC would meet with you and develop the agenda for the following year. And we used to get a specific list, it's still done, of items to be subject to the PAC's review that were carried over from prior years or that would be new. And I'm just wondering whether in developing the future language for its the PAC's existence, whether we ought to incorporate how these subject matters get generated. In other words, I'm fine with the role statements in any of these versions, but I'm wondering if what we need to focus more on is what subjects they get. So that will lead me to wander off from what you're asking for. So I won't go there at this point. And I'll look to my colleagues to respond to the roles statements. But that's mine, is that there needs to be some work on how the PAC agenda gets set and what issues really work for them. Historically, the main problem I'm thinking back when I was a PAC member or others, is that subjects would be brought to them at a meeting. They'd be asked to respond at that meeting and move forward. And that often, unlike we who get to study things at a committee level before they get to the full board, they often felt that they were asked to rubber stamp things, to be frank. And that was the most significant complaint I ever received or had myself when I was on the PAC. And so that is something that I think needs to be addressed. But I'll stop at this point and look to Director Rosario.
Thank you. I think this is a great direction. And for me, I like the third from a PAC member. It's simple and encompasses in one sentence everything that the other two do as well. So it's simple and one sentence, and it does it for me.
Director Waspy?
Well, I would tend to agree with Director Rosario. I like a clear, concise, short statement because it can go anywhere at once, really, in my opinion. I don't know. I like the PAC members at one. It's short, concise. I like the word provide advice as opposed to advise. I don't know. I might be agreeing with Kelly that I've gone too long today, but no, I think they're all good, but I like the third personally.
Okay, I'll go with the consensus.
Okay. Appreciate the feedback, and Director Coffey, your comments about the agenda are very well taken, and we have had conversations about that exact thing, and I think we'll have a good proposal to share fairly soon, actually. So I appreciate those comments, and I would like to also I've been informed that Chair Obringer is back on the Zoom, which means I probably should get out, stop sharing, and can potentially address the group.
Sure, now's a good time, Carlin.
Hi, I apologize. I'm addressing you from the car on my way home from a conference in Sacramento, but I'm glad to be able to join you this afternoon. And I thank you, for taking a look at the proposals by the PAC and for talking about, your experiences in the past, Board Member Coffey, and trying to, support the PAC as we move forward. There are people on the PAC, many subject matter experts that are looking to provide helpful feedback, and having the PAC be a space where conversations can happen to potentially, that conversations early on and provide some input to the board, so that in some cases the first conversation isn't whenever a topic is coming to the board, that there's a chance for it to go through a public hearing process at multiple steps. And I did just want to give an example of where I think that this has been successful. And I believe that you were actually on the meeting that day, board member Coffee, where we did have folks, and they had come to the executive committee in the past, but they also came to the PAC meeting to talk about the naming of what is now the Thurgood Marshall Regional Park. And so we had folks from the Black Employee Network, we had members of the community, youth members of the community, folks from some other affiliated organizations, and they gave passionate testimony to the PAC. And so that was an additional opportunity for them to air their ideas and suggestions. And then we were able to make a recommendation to the board. And also I will just share, I was able to share that that feedback around that particular topic with my Concord City Council colleagues, who also gladly weighed in support of the ultimate name Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. So I just wanted to weigh in today. Thank you for evaluating what we put before you as options. And the PAC stands ready to be able to support the board. There's many capable individuals, some of whom you all have appointed, and we stand ready.
Carlin, we've lost you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was done with my public comment and I said thank you. I apologize.
All right. Carlin, thank you very much for calling in.
Of course.
So I would guess with that, unless there's comments from additional comments from staff, I'm prepared to take the suggestion about the third role statement back to the PAC for their next meeting, where we're also going to hopefully have that conversation about agenda setting as well.
Yeah, and I also would like the process to include some discussion from this board of the importance of the PAC and why we think they are important. And, that goes back to the origins of the PAC. And I know there's been some discussion of that, but it also should reflect what our current thoughts are on the important role the PAC plays. To me, it's fairly straightforward, is on the real important issues that come to the board of directors. We get most of our input from the public, from individuals or organizations who have an acute interest in the issue. Trail usage is perhaps the most familiar to us right now. And we went through the process with the TUG, and there were, on purpose, that group was representative of the various trail use interest groups, right? And that is useful, but it then creates some tension and perhaps not clear outcomes from the group. And we're not looking to these groups for clear direction or advice, but for input generally. So that's okay. But I view the PAC as something more than just a particular interest of an individual or group on a particular issue. And that's why we appoint members, and we have external organizations that appoint members. And it therefore becomes representative of not special interest groups, for lack of a better word. And believe me, the special interests involved are very good interests to have, i.e. the Sierra Club and the Bicycle Council. But the PAC doesn't have a particular agenda that it brings to an issue. And it allows us to, have people that we have selected and we know are representative of a broad community. And as Carlin said, some have particular expertises, but as a group, it is independent. And so to me, to solicit input, it's like in politics, it's frequently they go out and pick focus groups that are purposely independent of special interests so they can find out what people are thinking. So that to me is the role of our PAC. And it's very important. And that's why in terms of agenda setting, we and Jim O'Connor set this agenda for them to consider over a period of time with various inputs and various focused agendas on trail usage. It's why we thought that would be a good way to approach these trail usage issues, because it wasn't the tug, it wasn't a group of trail use interests. And so we want to get that input from our PAC as we start addressing the very important trail usage issues that we have today due to the large volumes of people. So that I think that should be part of the discussion. And that's just my own view. And my colleagues have their own reasons for valuing the PAC. And at some point, the full board should be involved in that. So I'll stop that. Any last comments from my colleagues? Dee?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I second your statements there on the PAC. And one of the reasons why I brought it to the attention of our incoming, at the time, our new incoming general manager and Eric, was that I felt we were, in some ways, we had this huge brain trust that we were wasting by giving them information they didn't really need, and they weren't focused. And so I thought it would be good to have themselves have Eric and the PAC look at themselves and see what would make them more valuable, not only for their time and their brain trust, but their contribution to the board as an advisory board. And I think the last PAC meeting, just last Tuesday on trail issues, the breakout sessions, that was just wonderful. I thought it was valuable. Everyone had input in a small group, and we're going to see the results of that. But I thought it was very well received, and I participated, and I thought this is exactly what I wanted to see, to utilize that brain trust that we have. And it's an incredible bunch of folks who volunteered, and they have an incredible input or perspectives. So yeah, I'm totally supportive of this effort here to reimagine the PAC, and they're having a hand in it, and I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, thank you. I'm about halfway through that meeting on YouTube. I'm now at the post breakout section of that meeting in my own viewing. Director Waspy?
Oh, no, I would just agree with everything that's said here. I'm glad they're refocusing. I'm glad they're such valuable people, and obviously they produce great board members, future board members.
Yeah, we're gonna have a little caucus here.
Yeah.
3 of us. Director Obringer? I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. I just,
Chair
yes.
Obringer.
No, I just wanted to echo what board member Rosario was stating and say thank you to all who put together such a meaningful experience, I would say, for the PAC at our last meeting. We were able to be in the breakout sessions, really provide thoughtful input. It was extremely well facilitated. Members of the public could listen in on the different conversations. And of course, everything was recorded so that the public can watch, because nobody can be in every breakout session at the same time. And so I just want to say thank you. I thought that was really innovative, outside the box thinking, and it was very productive. And I think that that can serve as a good role model in the future for additional topics that it would be helpful to the board for the PAC to dive into. So just wanted to provide that additional thank you to all who organized and encouraging us to do that again in the future.
Yeah, very true. And I wanted to congratulate Jim O'Connor and the team for being innovative in the way you approached that last PAC meeting and the trail usage issue. That was very well done.
Just to comment on that, yes, it was very well done. DGM O'Connor facilitated very well, as did the the additional 3 breakout room individuals. And I would like to also compliment Yuli Padmore for dealing with the technical aspects of that and getting it through. But it really, as Chair Obringer said, it really was a constructive conversation. I was able to go, I floated, I was able to listen into each breakout session, and themes were understandably very similar. But I do know that we'll be bringing back a report from that feedback, both to the PAC and ultimately it will get to the board.
Okay, thank you. Bringing to a close the item role of Park Advisory Committee. Monique, do we have any requests for public comment?
President Coffey, I have not received any public comments or requests to speak on this item.
Okay, I don't see any hands up. So we will move to public comments, just general public comments. And I understand, Kelly, you wanted to participate at this point. So go ahead with 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So there's a long detailed list of short-term projects that are planned, capital projects that just appeared at a recent meeting. And these are projects that are scheduled to be funded and started within the next year or so. One of them, complete surprise, just appeared out of thin air, called Reroute Road at Mission Peak, costing $150,000. Now, no one saw this coming. No one in the community knows what road rerouting this is, because the ASD and operations department, they operate behind closed doors. But still, they might be putting the cart before the horse. Horses as equines is kind of like trail related, by the way. We're into puns here, because the trail planning, they hasn't been completed yet. Other items on the same agenda are future trail planning. That's actually an agenda. That's a budget item. Future trail planning, $500,000. But that's that's on the. And then there's a district-wide trails assessment. That's another $50,000. And so it makes me think that maybe the trail planning hasn't been completed yet. And here we are talking about road rerouting. Now, when we talk about roads, why are we spending money on roads when we need to maintain and enhance trails? Maybe staff should be explaining why it's rerouting the road, why that's taking first priority over fixing the trails and upgrading the restrooms. We need the district and the operations department and the ASD to be a true meaningful partner when it rolls out these projects, and talk to people in the community, not just bury things in budget items, obscure budget items that they hope nobody will ever read. How do these things get appeared? How do they get created into the budget? Whose idea was this? Where's the planning and the emails and all the stuff that's, by the way, a public records request, and it's a formal public records request. Where'd all this stuff come from? And is there any documentation to back it up? And how do you keep these things secret and not communicate with the interested groups? It's all a mystery. Thanks.
Thank you. And we'll move to committee comments. I have nothing further. Directors?
I would just like great presentations today, and on the 3030, I just wanted to advocate for. I was just reading my my Bay Area Monitor, and there was by the Bay Area publication of the League of Women Voters of Bay Area, they had an article on microgrids, something I've been advocating for a long time. And so I'm hoping in our included in our mission to meet the goals of 3030 that we look to electrify our as much as possible and incorporate alternative energy as much as possible. And this article on microgrids just makes it even more plausible to do that and take ourselves or contribute to the grid in a meaningful way, and also meet our goals. So again, thank you to everyone for the great presentations. Thank you. Well done.
Yes, and by the way, we all got notice from Together Bay Area that there is a forum on November 1st on the collective efforts of all the member agencies on 30 by 30. And that among the panel participants is EBRPD. I presume that's you, Dr. Alvarez.
Thank you, Director Coffey. Thank you for bringing this forward. No, actually, it's Chris Barton.
Oh,
And
Chris,
he-
okay.
Yes. He will be presenting our first climate smart park in Coyote Hills.
In where?
Coyote Hills.
Coyote Hills, okay.
Around the area, Patterson.
Yeah, so there are about 5 or 6 panelists and Chris will be one of them. And that's November 1st at 4 p.m. sponsored by Together Bay Area. I'll try to sit in on that. Director Waspy, anything in closing?
Thank you, staff, for great presentations. I guess I always ask this question. So I found this 30 by 30 presentation so wonderful and informative. Will we be presenting this to the full board at some point?
I don't know if we've planned on it, but certainly if there's of interest, we could put it on your agenda so we can talk offline or.
Yeah, let's talk about it because I found it truly inspirational.
Yeah, I agree. And along those lines, I recall when we did the what was that publication, the economic impact of the park district has on communities.
Yes.
It's a little bit of a stretch, but we did I know I did with the Alameda County Mayor's Conference. I did a presentation on it. I think somebody did it up in Contra Costa County. The Mayor's Conference might really like to see this. It's so it's so important that I think our efforts should be highlighted.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah,
You
that's a great suggestion.
Eric, periodically, the mayor's conferences ask around, who wants to do a presentation on topics that are of interest collectively to all the municipalities, the county and the agencies. This really does fit with what the mayor's conference is all about. So keep it, think about it. Anything in closing from the general manager or the deputy general manager? Nods no.
No, thank you so much for all the kind compliments and the work that has been done by staff that has been presented in general today. I think that the one thought that I would like to leave with you in terms of, well, the work that's ahead is as we dive closely into the details, it's with a very profound gratitude of all of the work that's being done here at the Park District that contributes to that goal, starting from the park rangers. Truly. And I said that yesterday that as I was talking to them that they do so much with so little. And the same thing goes for stewardship staff. They have done so much with so little, and yet there's so much to be done. So it's just the unsung heroes of this organization. I have the great privilege to represent them, but it's with great humility and a great sense of appreciation. Because those are the folks that are really making the difference here.
Yeah, we all agree, and thank you for those thoughts. If nothing further, we stand adjourned.